We're born into our names, but we become family by heart. I'm Dustin Gruss, public speaker and family transition coach. When my wife and I found out in the beginning of 2016 that we weren't going to be able to have our own biological children just 7 months into our marriage, we were shook. Little did we know what lied ahead through our journey of infertility, foster care, and where we are now, having recently adopted our two beautiful boys. What we do know is every little bit of help we got along the way was priceless. And that's what we can expect with this podcast. Stories of inspiration and resources to lead you through that journey. From the heartbreak of infertility to the hope and blessings that come with foster care and adoption. We may have different stories, backgrounds, and names, but we're all family here. This is Family by Heart. What's up, family? Welcome to another episode of Family by Heart. I'm your host, Dustin Gruss, and I am very excited for our guest today. Over the course of the last 5 years, him and his wife have gone through 2 rounds of IVF. They've experienced 2 miscarriages, and they've also found joy in 1 miraculous baby. He offers fertility help for men and couples, and he's sharing ways to be a supportive partner through infertility, including through his new book that was just released on July 1st, the IVF Dad book. My guest today is Keegan Prue.
Yeah, thanks,
there
Dustin.
He is, taking a nice little shot of the IVF Dad book in the background. Keegan, thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have you on and honored that you would come on.
Well, I'm really honored that you'd have me on. Yeah, I get to have been practicing my Vanna White move here with the displaying the book. But it's so great to be here, and I'm just excited to dig in. I'm sure we have so much to talk about, and I'm just really grateful for the content you're sharing and the information and awareness you're bringing to such an important issue that affects so many of us. So I'm excited to dig in, because the more those of us who've been, on the longer path to parenthood stick together, the more that difficulty is going to feel easier for those who are still going through it. So, yeah, I'm just really excited to dig in.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, our stories are a little different on how we came into this space of talking about infertility and supporting men that are going through it now. But I know you wrote a blog on it, and I don't want to take views away from your blog, but why did you start the IVF Dad? You can go into that.
Yeah, for sure. As anybody who's been through the infertility journey knows, it can be a really lonely and long process. And one thing that really helped me throughout was just hearing other people's stories and hearing tips. There's a great community on social media. There are so many great resources out there, podcasts, blogs, etc. And I just noticed that most of those were written by and for women, which is first totally understandable, right? Like if anybody through infertility treatment knows there's a huge burden on women, so that community is so important for them. But I thought it was important, just like you're doing, to start adding a little bit of support and perspective from the male side too. For those of us who are going through it, again, it can be really lonely. And I think infertility challenges men in some really specific ways around, some stereotypes that are really prevalent in terms of how we're expected to act and be, and how we're expected to support ourselves and support our partners. So I thought it was so important to just bring more awareness to that and just provide a space and some information that can hopefully be helpful to other men who are in the shoes.
Absolutely. It definitely puts a lot of stress on not only the woman, especially when you enter the IVF stage, but also the male, because he has to sort his feelings as well as be that supportive partner for his wife, and then just the marriage as a whole. I mean, a lot of times couples are talking ahead of time before they get married, what the plan is for marriage. Are we having kids? Are we not? And if you're not having that conversation before you get married, make sure you have that conversation. But for a lot of people, they don't even think of the possibility of infertility being an issue. They just kind of go right into it, and then suddenly it's it's something that the couples aren't prepared for, and you have to have kind of those outside resources to step in. So again, infertility itself being that being such a big issue before you even get to the decision of IVF, putting that strain on the marriage, what would you say was the lowest point for you and your wife? Like, well, actually, before you answer that, were you guys diagnosed with a reason why you were dealing with infertility? Was it, and then what was your lowest point from there before you got to the decision of IVF?
Sure. Yeah. So we ended up with sort of a diagnosis. I think the big umbrella was the unexplained infertility that so many people are deal with, which can be frustrating because we feel like we live in such an advanced time when we can Google the answer to almost anything in 2 seconds, but we can't know what's going on with this basic thing of trying to get pregnant. But we did have some hints. We went through the full battery of testing. Olivia went through all the hormone testing, had, some ultrasound checks. I obviously did my semen analysis to see, how were my sperm? Were they healthy? Were they normal? And so we got a little bit of some hints. So the big thing that stood out when we first went to the fertility clinic and talked with the reproductive endocrinologist was that Olivia's AMH level was a little bit low for her age. And that came as a little bit of a surprise because one thing we learned was, the benefit of seeing a fertility specialist is they have a lot more understanding of what's normal by age, by situation, because actually Olivia's normal OBGYN had tested her AMH about 6 months prior when we kind of first, the first line testing there at the regular OBGYN, and the regular office said, this is normal. And so it came as a surprise to us after hearing that her AMH was normal to find out that actually from the reproductive endocrinologist standpoint, it was not normal for her age. It was low for her age. So while it was kind of in the average for everybody, it was low for her age. So that was one kind of important tip that I always try to get out there is, there are a lot of great OBGYN providers out there, but reproductive endocrinologists and fertility clinics bring that extra amount of expertise. So they might be able to clue you in on things you might not otherwise have learned. So that gave us an idea of kind of what we were working with. We knew that potentially, she might have a little bit of diminished ovarian reserve, a lower number of eggs. And so as a result, helped us know to kind of expect potentially getting less eggs during IVF and less embryos, which we were certainly on kind of the lower end there. So that was all really helpful. And like I said, the big thing we learned in that kind of process of getting the diagnosis was just how important it is to be proactive and really advocate for ourselves. So it just kind of helped us all throughout to make sure that we were making the right choices to give us the best shot at success. And then definitely in terms of the lowest moment, you had mentioned earlier, we had 2 miscarriages along the way. They were in pretty rapid succession after our first round of IVF. We had the first miscarriage shortly after our first round of IVF. And basically that was kind of a miscarriage where just the embryo implanted, but nothing developed. So that was hard because it was very uncertain for a while. But then definitely after the second miscarriage was the lowest point because that was only 4 or 5 months later. And that miscarriage was really hard. It was what's called a missed miscarriage. Folks in the community might be kind of aware of what that is. It's when there's no outward signs or physical symptoms of a miscarriage happening. We went in for a 12-week ultrasound. We had seen, had good ultrasounds at the IVF clinic prior to that. Went in for a 12-week ultrasound and there was no heartbeat. That baby was no longer growing, unfortunately. So I think the 1-2 punch of having that happen right back to back was really devastating. And, of course, looking back, I can see it did help us because we took a break for a couple of months and really used that time to process what we'd been through, step back, did some traveling, that we had kind of put off, as so many people do, of saying we got to, get back for another round of treatment, So we said, let's travel. And also did some really good outreach and we're lucky to meet with some great adoptive families during that time. Families who were providing foster care and advocacy groups there. And so that really helped us too, to understand there are a lot of pathways to parenthood. And so that helped us to, I think, just come back with a fresher kind of mind.
Wow. How long was it between um, when you guys had reached your diagnosis of like diminished ovarian reserve and the other things you mentioned between that and when you started the IVF? Because I do find it interesting that after doing the 2 rounds of IVF is kind of more when you took the time to speak more to the adoptive families and foster care families and that like again, that's just what you told me now. You might have talked to them before you started IVF too, but I know a lot of times you will see couples that are dealing with infertility that will approach um, each of the options, like look at the whole table before they start going off. So, what was kind of your approach when you found out the diagnosis, and then how long till you decided to move forward with IVF, and if you looked at anything else?
Yeah, that's such a great question, and definitely one thing I would have done differently is, we weren't, I would say, doing kind of that work to look into adoption, fostering. We of course kind of knew that those options were out there earlier in the process when we
Mm-hmm.
really kind of understood that things weren't working for us with just trying to get pregnant the typical way. And so I wish I had done more of that earlier because it was such a real turning point in our process where we left, even just the first meeting we had with a really generous family who had their children through adoption here in our area. I just remember leaving that meeting and feeling like, okay, I understand how this works. I can, um, you know, see how this process would absolutely fit within our goals for family building. And so it really helped to flip my mind of like, there's only this one way and we have to move forward. So that's a little bit of a digression, but I definitely wish that I had done more work. And I kind of write about this in the book. One of the things I recommend is do that work on the front end, really understand what are all the different options for family building, because it's just important to know. It can really help you throughout the process. So when we did get the diagnosis, though, it was a pretty fast process. We tried for about a year. After about 6 months, kind of went for initial testing with regular OBGYN and getting my semen analysis. And then we did have about 3 months of using letrozole. Letrozole is kind of like Clomid. It induces ovulation. So that was prescribed by the regular OB to see if that worked. It didn't work. And so simultaneous to that, we had already made an appointment with the RE because, we were both approaching our mid-30s at that point and just kind of knew with our goals, we better be proactive. So it all happened really quickly, from the time that we had our first kind of consult with the RE to the point where we had like IVF meds arriving at our doorstep was maybe 2 months. So it was pretty quick process. And then, from there it was like right into the miscarriages. And so I think that's why it was important after the second miscarriage to press pause a little bit and, just gain a better understanding of like, what are all the options out there for us?
Absolutely. Now, did you guys take advantage of pursue any counseling during that period of when you found out with the diagnosis was and then going through the miscarriages to even, I mean, was counseling any part of that journey, grief, marital or otherwise?
Yeah, so our fertility clinic recommended a great counselor who both Olivia and I saw individually, and then she kind of helped us, guided us with things we can talk about, and that was either after the first or second miscarriage we went in just to help kind of process both the grief of those miscarriages, but also figure out um, how do we prepare going forward for that, about what that kind of means for us, and continued to. It was really helpful because we both kind of saw the counselor on and off more when it was helpful. And it became really helpful also during, the pregnancy that ultimately became our daughter Eliza, because another aspect, of course, of going through the trauma of those miscarriages is that that pregnancy brought a lot of anxiety with it. And every point in the process, it was really hard to trust that, she was going to continue growing safely and that next ultrasound was going to be okay. Going to the 12-week ultrasound during Eliza's pregnancy was one of the most nerve-wracking moments of the entire time, because we just had that really traumatic experience before and just kind of held our breath as we waited. And I know that's such a common experience for anyone going through, infertility IVF treatment. But yeah, it was really helpful. And again, something I found was helpful to ask the IVF clinic about. Because they were able to point us in the direction of somebody who really kind of understood what the process was like, understood, the grief of pregnancy loss, and working with couples and people who had experienced that, which was really helpful too, because, it wasn't sort of going into, a counselor who we didn't know if they were going to, really fit with that thing. The clinic had worked with this counselor before, and so it ended up being really helpful for us. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. We, again, kind of similar background for us. We went through, it was because of my wife and I, we were also mid-30s when we started trying. And because of our age and also my wife's family history, some cancer running through my wife's family history, they suggested for us 6 months instead of a year. So at 6 months if we were pregnant, to go in and diagnose, see what was happening. It's kind of the same thing for my wife. It was diminished ovarian reserve. And really they told us that she had basically like no good eggs, and that they didn't even recommend IVF for us. Because, if we were not going to get pregnant, if we tried it and we were unsuccessful at getting pregnant, it would shoot her cancer risks like through the roof. I mean, you're looking at like less than 5% of us getting pregnant and shooting her cancer risk up to like 300%. And so we were then like had to face the facts of like, okay, it's either going to be, surrogacy, fostering, or adoption, or nothing at all. And for us at that time, like my wife wasn't really comfortable with the idea of adopting. We had talked with a couple families as well that adopted and went through privacy agencies and stuff like that. And she just didn't feel comfortable with it at all. And so we were kind of preparing for a life of just the two of us. And so we went to a grief counselor and all sorts of stuff on our journey. And I know one thing that helped us through it, which I saw in, I believe, your blog or maybe just your website in general, was we got a dog. And I know you guys have a Weimaraner, I believe.
Greyhound, actually.
Greyhound. And that's been a big, so where did the Greyhound come into the process for you guys? Like, had you already had it, or was she a later addition to the family?
Yeah, we already had so Desmond is our Greyhound. So I'll just so we got Desmond kind of like at about the same time that we started trying to get pregnant, because we had Olivia and I had met when we were living in New York City at the time, about 6 or 7 years ago, and then moved to upstate New York with the whole idea of, we're going to move and get a house with a lawn and a dog and a kid, and we're going really well until we got to the kid part, because we got the house and we got the lawn and we got the dog really quickly, and then ran into the brick wall. But so we got Desmond, and like, not with the idea that he'd be such a great support through all of this, but obviously, he has been. Greyhounds are about the most chill dogs in the world, so they're a great support for anything like stressful. Basically, they yes, they're racers. They go in spurts really fast, but they're sprinters. So we could take him to the dog park in 10 minutes in, he's already tired out because he's done his sprints, and he's like, all right, I'm going to go back to the couch for the next 23 hours. And so it was nice to have, our little very Zen Buddha type Greyhound dog to help throughout the process. How was it for you guys?
Well, I mean, we call her our angel on earth because she really changed everything for us. Eva is her name. We got her from a family that had multiple dogs and cats and horses, and they called her Diva because she seemed to always want attention. But we didn't like the name Diva, but we didn't want to confuse the dog, so we just dropped the D and changed the I to E and just went with Eva. And she yes, she loved attention. She loved being loved on.
Hmm.
And my wife, who up to this point had been very reluctant and saying that she didn't want pets, she didn't want a dog and stuff. Even the dog bonded with her at first when they brought the dog over, because the plan was they were going to bring her over for a visit. If the visit went well, she'd stay the night. The night went well, she'd stay for the weekend. If the weekend went well, she'd stay for the week, and so on. So while they're there, the dog was sitting at my wife's feet, leaning into her, looking up at her, and I have pictures of them just bonding. Well, as soon as the family left, my wife just hops on her phone, is trying to ignore this dog, just trying as hard as she could. And um and I knew what she's doing. I called her out on it. Well, the funny part of the story is maybe a week earlier, we had a really bad storm here in Ohio where my wife was scared of the rain and the thunder and the lightning, and she was making me spoon her and cuddle her and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Well, our dog is also afraid of thunderstorms, and before this, my wife swore up and down, if we get a dog, it will not be on our furniture, it will not be on our couch, it will not be on our bed, it will not be anything. Well, during the week where we were given a trial, there was a thunderstorm, and worse than the one that my wife was making me cuddle her in. And she just suddenly is all about this dog. Oh my gosh, I'll take care of you. I'll take care of you. So, and then nights I'd be coming home from work, and she's got the dog up on her lap on the chair, on the couch. And I'm just are you serious? I mean, I'm thrilled at this point, but I'm also you are BSing me. You didn't want this dog. And
Oh
so,
yeah, yeah.
but she's again our angel on earth, because she opened our hearts back up, because again, my wife didn't want a dog, but it opened her heart to love an animal that wasn't originally
Mm-hmm.
hers in a way that she didn't think was possible. So then it opened her eyes and made her realize, okay, well, maybe I can love a child that isn't mine in a different way. And our church had been involved in a foster care camp, that would take kids from the community to a camp for a week and just love on the kids, teach them how to ride a bike, do all these different things with the kids. And so we got involved and volunteered for a day and stuff. And just seeing the issue with the foster system, we knew there was a problem. And we're well, we got this house with the idea of having kids. So let's open our house to foster.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we went into. So Eva really kind of opened up our entire world to new things, and so she's our angel on earth. She's our fur baby for sure.
Yeah. And I see she
So
even decided to make an appearance. So
yes, you saw her kind of creep in here. She had a
yeah.
nice little visit at the vet today too. So
Oh, nice. Hey, so I'm interested to hear, so before the point when you kind of, found out about your wife's diagnosis, I'm always interested to hear how did you and her navigate just that initial feeling of every couple gets to that point where we're like, hey, I don't know if trying, the typical way is going to work for us. What did that kind of look like for you guys? Did you have a more of an awareness because of that family history, or, was there a moment where it was oh gosh, I'm not sure if this is going to work for us? How did that kind of play out?
whew, okay, yeah, it's we I feel like I had more of an awareness, that um, because of her family's cancer risk and everything. Funny thing is, on just her second date, we opened up and said that we both had to have kids. It was non-negotiable. We had to have kids. So then, to fast forward 7 months into her marriage, is when we found out the news, and she was, as most women that want to be mothers are, she wanted to carry the baby. She wanted to have the baby, and she believed with all her heart, and still believes, that she could carry a baby to term and go through the birth and all that stuff. So she was really kind of being, what's the word I'm looking for? She, I don't, she was being a little bit more hard nosed about it, saying she wanted to try, she wanted to do IVF. She's determined to do whatever we could. And I was more telling her no. Like, while we said that on just our second date, no, I said I do to you, not to us having a family. Like, family could be a part of it, but our marriage is what I swore into, and going from there. And so then from there, it was a lot up and down moments, where you get the pregnancy announcements from other friends or other people, and those were always really tough. And I would say our lowest moment was one night when I had to tell her I found out someone else was pregnant again with another baby.
Mm.
And we had been trying, and she locked herself in our bathroom, and I was trying to talk to her through. We have little slits in the towards the bottom of the bathroom door, like a vent for the door. So I was trying to kind of talk to her through that. So I basically laid on the floor, and was waiting for her in there, talking to her, and it was probably the worst. I'd heard her cry. And then it got even worse when she came out of the bathroom and saw that I was on the floor waiting for her. Because then she went into another room, which was then our office, and she basically cornered herself in the room and wouldn't let me come near her. And was basically telling me to leave the marriage, to go have with someone else what she felt she couldn't provide for me anymore. And what we once said we were unwilling to go without, and that being having a kid. And so it took a while to calm her down, and then it was just a long kind of grief process. We went through counseling, a grief counselor, which helped her see that she doesn't have to be Superwoman or Wonder Woman or Supergirl and handle everything on her own, that she could handle, like, she could let some things go and not put all the stress on her. Because I was pretty adamant too about, while it was diminished ovarian reserve and my sperm count was deemed normal and everything, like it still wasn't, she couldn't get pregnant. It wasn't her dealing with infertility. It was still the both of us. And so I was always pretty adamant about that with her.
Yeah, and I think that's such an important thing for men to know. I think is, it's always so important to just remember, like, this is something that we're going through together. And I think, it's funny, I can so relate to your story of laying on the floor, because I think that's something that is so natural for women who are in couples dealing with infertility to express and feel, that they feel this guilt that they can't, give a child, so to, quote unquote, to their husband, especially, for instances like ours, where, much like you guys, we talked, I think, on our second or third date about having kids and how much we look forward to it. And so that was something that was definitely, I felt, I needed to navigate too, was to just really be conscientious about constantly reminding and saying, we're going to get through this together. We're going to look for options together. We're going to work on all of this together, because I think it can put just so much pressure on the the woman in the relationship, particularly in a situation like that. So yeah, it's a really important thing to realize, and just to recognize that that might be something that your wife or your partner is feeling, that they can really feel a tremendous amount of guilt, and that can send us into our own spin, right, of like, I don't want them to feel guilty, but it's like, am I causing this guilt? So yeah, it's a tough thing. But yeah, something that's important to just communicate and talk about. And
yeah, which is also why I'm so grateful that I stumbled upon your account, and your book, and just everything about you, because I think there does need to be more of an awareness. Because really, I was fortunate while we were first going through our journey with fertility struggles, that my wife did find one book called What He Can Expect When She's Not Expecting. and it kind of goes through like a lot of the different options and lingo and stuff, and it does so in a very male friendly manner and sports friendly, and like so it's pretty good. But like I think taking it to the next step and again finding someone like yourself that is working on it and still working on it, because I know the gentleman that wrote it, that other book, like he's also a journalist overall and stuff. So he's got his normal job, but here you are, you're really diving into spreading awareness and helping and doing all those things. So I'm grateful for that, and that you are lending a male voice to the situation. And it's important that we as men realize that, yes, it's important that we address our struggles and what's going on with our emotions and our minds, but realizing that it is a we conversation, a we journey, and not just she or I. It's that you are going through it together, and that you are offering the right kind of support to your spouse.
Yeah. And I think it can be a really good opportunity for guys too, because, it's easy to say the stereotype, but I think, dealing with emotions and especially being emotionally supportive, both to ourselves and to our partners, is not always something that society prepares us really well for. If you think of the most common male stereotypes, it's like the strong silent, it doesn't complain, just goes about their business, takes action, fixes things, all this stuff, it all goes back to the boys don't cry that so many people hear when they're growing up. But, when you're going through something as tough as negotiating, trying to build a family and struggling with it, that's going to bring up some real difficult feelings that, you're going to feel the grief, you're going to feel the anger, you're going to feel the sadness, you're going to feel the, just the wondering of, are all these things that I thought were going to be part of my life ever going to happen? And so I think that's a really important first step for a lot of men too, that can help, is just, working to understand what those feelings are and almost like getting back in touch with them, because for some of the guys out there, we might spend a lot of our time thinking more about living up to those stereotypes of, kind of being the strong silent one versus being comfortable with sharing when we are having those struggles and what those feelings are. So that can be a really big first step, and hopefully things like, having podcasts like this, having resources to look to, will help just understand those, because I think that's a first step, and it's something that's so critical to being a supportive partner and to also supporting yourself, because self-care is really important during the infertility journey too.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's important too for guys going through this part of the journey, I imagine your wife probably had difficulty with the trigger of pregnancy announcements from other friends and family. But recognizing triggers for you, did you have any particular triggers in addition to the pregnancy announcements? Because I know for me, I recall one night playing after a softball game, walking back towards the cars and walking along two of my teammates that were both dads, and them just talking about, taking their kids to the amusement park or taking them to like a baseball game or something, and just them sharing that. And then there I am. I felt like, okay, well, I'm just about the same age as them. So it's not like they're older guys and their kids are older. So they're in a different place than I. It's like, no, we should be in the same place. So it was kind of a trigger for me. And then seeing dads with their kids and stuff, like, and those sweet moments. Like, so what were some triggers for you?
Oh, definitely. Definitely the same things. That's one of the biggest, with pregnancy announcements, right? I feel like that's one of the biggest ironies of infertility, is you tend to go through it at a time in your life when everybody else is getting pregnant. And so, it's like you go through the, when you're maybe a little bit younger, you get just like the wedding announcements and the engagement announcements. And then suddenly a couple of years later, it's like the dial turns and every time you turn around, somebody else is having a baby. So that is hard. And that's so hard, right? Because you want to be happy for those friends. And it's not that you're, mad at them. It's, you're sad for yourself, even if you're happy for them. And those are two really hard things to hold, at the same time. So that was definitely hard. I remember so many times, even just walking in the grocery store, I'd be like cruising down the aisle, going to the next one and see, a visibly pregnant woman down the aisle. And I would just turn around, go the other way. Just was like, don't want to, those were at the harder points, but there were definitely those moments where I was like, nope, going to go to the next aisle. Don't want to spend the next 30 seconds, being around this woman who's, visibly pregnant, because it just brought that to mind. This is the thing we want so much and we're not able to have right now. So, so many of those things. And definitely, as you said, just the doing things that I really looked forward to, the idea of doing with my kids. Am involved in some music stuff. I play in a town band here where we live, and it's kind of a multi-generational group. It's music teachers and people who played in high school and just dust off the instrument once a year, and then also some high school kids get to play in it too. And so saw a few people who the parents were playing and the kids were playing, and that was something, sharing music was something I've always looked so much forward to. Being able to enjoy with kids. And so that was, I remember coming back from a rehearsal one night and, at one point in our journey and telling Olivia, just, I wonder if, is that ever going to be something that's an option for us, or is that something that I'm, an experience that I'm not going to be able to have? So yeah, it's amazing how much it kind of just goes through every aspect of your life sometimes.
All right, so definitely you have those triggers. What about the times where you have those people, those individuals, those family members that mean well, but say the things that you just don't want to hear? How did that go for you and your wife handling them, where they're suddenly saying, oh, well, why don't you do adoption? Or, oh, I know a family member or I know this person that was told they couldn't do it. And like, how did you guys handle those situations?
Yeah, it's hard, right? And we all, everybody hears those comments, and it's hard because we're really fortunate in that, that was like 1 out of 50 people. Most people were super supportive and wonderful and great. But yeah, we definitely had those moments. We had a person once suggest to us that, maybe the issue was that we had to, we should just like find a really romantic hotel with a hot tub suite, and that would be the thing that would fix it for us. That was probably like the most to like totally tone deaf or just, I guess, ignorant kind of thing that we had heard. And truth be told, how did we deal with it in the moment? We were just kind of like, okay, yeah. And then went back and proceeded to debrief it, just me and Olivia, and be like, man, what an awful thing to say, and kind of work through it. But it's right. It's really hard in the moment. Sometimes we're depending on the person, maybe we feel the energy to kind of not push back, but just be like, hey, it'd be actually that's something better to say would be this, or like that doesn't feel supportive to us. But often we're not going to necessarily feel that. And the key there was just Olivia and I would debrief it later or talk about it and just kind of process it that way. And of course, text as we kind of got farther into the process and learned more about other people we kind of knew who were going through infertility, that would be an opportunity to text them and be like, this person just said this really ignorant thing to me. And, you kind of have that gallows humor and laugh about it together. But it's that definitely happens, right? Like, everybody hears those things. Did you guys ever get any good things like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, it would be we would get that often. I have a cousin whose neighbor whose brother had was told they couldn't do it, or even firsthand we'd have people said like, oh well, I was told I couldn't have kids, and here I am 3 kids later and stuff. It's like, okay, like we are going through a different set of circumstances than what you did, so appreciate it. Like, just, thank you. Just please send positive thoughts our way and stuff. Like, so we never really, address people in a rough way or brutal way.
Yeah.
Almost kind of the commiserating behind the scenes. with things I said. It was the ones that would really stick out to us and get us would be when my wife would be brave enough to post an article or something she came across, and even attach a little bit of her story or our story and what we're going through. And within the article, it would even say things not to say to people dealing with fertility.
Mm-hmm.
And some individuals would feel the need to say something on the comment thread that was showing that they clearly didn't read the article that she attached because they said the thing that they weren't supposed to say. Like, so it was just like, oh, come on, like, be better than that. Like, if it's better, like, just hit the like or the hug emoji or whatever, like, just, do that instead of commenting. Like, that is more meaningful for us than empty words or ignorant words that would hurt.
Yeah, totally.
And it's kind of funny with what you're saying too on the person saying go to a suite with a hot tub and everything. Like, while that whole 6 months we were trying before we got our diagnosis and everything, was my wife would not allow me to go into a hot tub because it was one of the things, like, for men's fertility, like, you're not supposed to be in, getting the boys too warm. And I worked at a gym, and I was like, man, that's like one of my best ways to recover and feel better. Like,
it's true. And I mean, I will say the kind of other big thing I talk about a lot in the book is just, the ways that you can build your support network. And it can feel really scary to be kind of out there about what you're going through, but I'll say that the good thing about it is you quickly kind of learn, like, who are those supportive people who get it, who are there in a really supportive way. And you also kind of find out who is just less comfortable with it or has those remarks that hurt, even if they're well-meaning. And I guess it's an opportunity to also kind of set up some boundaries. I mean, I don't know if you guys ever felt the need to do that around, like baby showers and things like that. That's a big thing, right? Is, because we're going through this at a time when everybody's having babies, you tend to have a lot of baby shower invitations, and there can definitely be those times where if it feels like the right thing to do is can't go to that baby shower, send a gift. I think it's important to work on our ability to set those boundaries for ourselves to kind of do what's going to keep us in the best frame of mind during all of this, and know that people who are really there to support you will totally understand.
Yeah, my wife definitely had a hard time with some of those boundaries early on. She would try to brave it and go, and she would at least take one of her best friends with her, or have a friend to go with her to those. And the people that were generally having them, like, understood when she had to leave early, or said that, like, this is too much for me, I can't do it. So I was thankful for one of her best friends for being that partner, being that teammate to go with her to places I couldn't, like baby showers and stuff like that. And then we also had another, like, amazing friend that would reached out to Leanne to tell her that, hey, I'm pregnant. I want to tell you before I put the announcement on. I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing, and things like that. Like, little gestures like that are extremely meaningful as well. Yeah. And my wife has gotten better when it comes to those baby showers. As far as going, she's also realized, like, she does let them know ahead of time, like, hey, like, even though I'm here at this stage now, having had, adopted our two boys, it still is like a trigger emotion thing for her. And so she lets them know that, I'm just going to send a gift, or, I'm just not going to make it, or duck out early. So, but setting the boundaries is absolutely a huge thing. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, again, we've come into this space of trying to help men dealing with fertility. And again, the idea that men are not the greatest at expressing their emotions. And then we have our triggers that we deal with. Did you, during your time going through the whole fertility struggle, find yourself using any destructive coping mechanisms at all? And then what ultimately helped you? I know you said you found a community of people going through fertility struggles, and that hearing their stories really helped and being able to talk to them. But
Yeah.
what kind of destructive behaviors did you possibly find yourself turning to? And then what ultimately helped you get over it?
Yeah.
Get through it.
You know, the thing that was probably the biggest problem for me was just this feeling that I had to fix things. And so how that kind of showed up was me really getting obsessively into just like the doctor Google, to the point where it really became too much time. You know, I was spending every free moment looking at trying to find different research studies. And, you know, what that drove was just me getting more and more anxious because I'd read a research study about something and I'd say, oh, well, you know, hey, I heard this thing about this, I don't know, this vitamin that, or this like thing with your thyroid or this other, whatever you happen to be. And then, you know, soon I'd be like 40 tabs deep on my computer with like research studies and being like, I don't know, have we talked enough about this with, you know, the doctor? Is there something we need to make sure that we do? Like, this could really be like, this could be it. This could be the magic thing that's holding us back. And so, while it felt good in the moment, I definitely realized over time that that was a really harmful habit because all it did was drive me to get, you know, more worked up, more stressed, more anxious about, hey, what if we're missing this one thing? And what I kind of realized over time was like, there's not necessarily that one thing, and there's not necessarily that clear cut answer. And I think that's definitely a tendency that can show up in anybody, but I think it's definitely a tendency sometimes for guys to feel like we have to take action, we have to fix things. And the reality when you're dealing with these, you know, with fertility issues is a lot of times all you can do is wait and try and get the best information you have, and go with it based on that. So, you know, what helped me take a step back from that, you know, that was really at its worst during our second pregnancy that ended in a miscarriage. And so I think what kind of snapped me out of it was just having that couple months after to just take a break and step back and think about our journey a little bit more broadly and think about, you know, knowing that there's going to be really tough times. How do I want to approach those? And what are the things that have been really helpful to me during the journey so far? And what are the things that have just made me feel worse? And so reflecting on that was really helpful to say, you know, all of this obsessively Googling and trying to figure out answers to things is not helping. It's making me feel way worse. And it's making Olivia feel way worse because now I'm stressed out about something that's like this really crazy esoteric, you know, part of medicine that I'm not really even technically qualified to be like reading these articles about. So, you know, it was helpful to both talk to Olivia about it, you know, and say like, listen, I know I've gotten like a little bit overboard with this. So, you know, kind of just watch me, like feel free to call me out when it's happening. And so that was really good. And meditation definitely helpful, you know, that definitely that Googling, you know, just kind of drove my mind, like constantly thinking, you know, I'd be thinking at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night when I'm trying to go to sleep, I'd be thinking about that, you know, research study or like, hey, what are some other research studies I could Google about this thing or that thing? And so, you know, taking time to kind of quiet down, meditate, and just give myself more space to kind of accept, like, I'm not necessarily going to get the answer to this. I've just got to kind of have faith and give up that control and trust that we're doing the best we can with a really good medical team who wants to see the best for us. So yeah, it was definitely a process, but yeah, it can be tough.
Now you did mention two words I'm going to focus on in there, and that's one being you meditated, and then you had to have faith. So do you and your wife have any spirituality that you practice, and did that play a role in the journey you've been on at all? If you do practice spirituality, and did it kind of make you question your faith if you do follow any certain spirituality?
Yeah, so neither of us really, you know, ascribe to or practice any faith actively. You know, I think meditation is definitely kind of a form of, I think, connecting and prayer or whatever you want to call it for me. Like it allows me to feel both centered within myself, but also connected to other people. And I think the biggest source of hope and faith for us has been the community of people we've connected with. throughout it. And that's, what, if there's no other point to faith in the faith practice, what is it than that, having that community um, to share that support and really, offer love and help and kindness. And so that's been really meaningful. And that really came after we started being open about what we were going through. We found it while it definitely brought out a small handful of those awkward comments, what it brought way more than anything else was just this tremendous outpouring of community, of uh, people reaching out and saying, we totally get it. We've been there. And people we had no idea who had gone through infertility, who had miscarriages, who were struggling with it right now at the same time as we were. So we at one point kind of posted a longer post on Facebook about what we were going through, and literally within an hour had text messages, calls, reach outs from close friends and people we hadn't seen in years saying that we had gone through the same thing. And so I think that what really provided that hope and sense of faith and sense of community to us kind of in our own way was just seeing that sharing the struggle we had been through led us to greater connection with a lot of people, with neighbors that we had exchanged kind words with for a number of years. But then after kind of coming out about what we were going through, had this deeper connection of, hey, me and my wife went through this 20 years ago. And, here's how kind of our story ended up. We were really lucky. We got to adopt these two wonderful kids, and being able to connect and share those stories has been the most meaningful part of this process, and definitely gave us faith during the hard times in its own way.
And again, it's kind of interesting how that plays a part too, when it's that they're sharing their own lived experience of dealing with the fertility struggles first, because again, you look at the one side, the miracle stories that go, well, they weren't my friend from a friend of a cousin or whoever, like they weren't supposed to, but here they did. And versus hearing firsthand, like, well, not only did I have my miracle baby, but I went through that same struggle that you are currently experiencing. So here's the things that worked for us. Here's how, here's things that you could do. What can we do for you? Like in that sense of community of someone being in the struggle versus just that blanket statement coming from someone else. And I've seen that community less from our story and our perspective. We had some moments ourselves where sharing our story did enable us to help other people at the time, but more today as I started this journey with the podcast. One of my early guests, someone I've known for a long time, Lauren, and her husband David, she set up a separate Instagram account for just their journey through IVF and everything, their journey to baby Raz, as she calls it. And just, even though they're in the midst of their third round of IVF, the sense of community I just get from looking at her account and her stories, her tags, her well wishes to other friends that are going through, trigger day, retrieval day, all the different days that are associated with IVF. Like it's beautiful to see that sense of community that you're talking about there.
Yeah, and it can really sustain us through such a hard time. So it's much easier to look back on now, sort of, and as you said, in the same way, I think that your wife probably, as you said, still feels those triggers. Definitely can relate to that too. I think going through an experience like a fertility struggle is something that never truly leaves us. You can be on the other side of it, and whatever that sort of means and however that looks for you. But it's something that never goes away. But that I think in retrospect, we can kind of now start to feel a lot of gratitude for just the number of people we've been able to connect to and hear from, and folks who are around the world and we've maybe never met in person, but just know this person's going through it too. And having been through something so hard, there's just that instant bond and connection of, I want you to find success because I know how hard it is. I know how lonely and dark those moments can be. And so, I am really grateful that there's such a good community out there.
Mm-hmm. Now you again had your 2 miscarriages, in the midst of IVF. And then you had your miracle baby in 2020. So Olivia, correct?
Eliza is our daughter.
Eliza. Olivia is your wife.
Yeah.
Eliza.
Yep.
So was Eliza from embryo from round of IVF?
She was, yeah. She was from our second round of IVF, and so we did after those 2 miscarriages, did some additional testing for Olivia and me. Mostly as usual for Olivia, she gets to bear the brunt of most of it, but just to check in on were there other maybe genetic factors coming into play or things we hadn't caught. And so a couple of things came up out of that, which was helpful for us in our situation. First we decided that it was important to send out our embryos to do genetic testing on them, which, an individual choice for couples, right, as to whether they're comfortable with that. But because we knew for sure that there were genetic issues at play with both of our miscarriages, we decided it was important just to try to give ourselves a better opportunity and hopefully avoid that difficulty again. And then the second thing that came up was the RE discovered that Olivia had a potential blood clotting factor, which was not something that was necessarily going to affect her day-to-day life, but that could have some bearing on implantation and healthy growth during pregnancy. And so prescribed her with a daily blood thinner to use throughout pregnancy, so that Eliza's successful pregnancy was the first time we used that. Now, of course, we don't know, was that the silver bullet? We don't know. There were a lot of things at play that were different about that pregnancy. So, but again, kind of being proactive there and helped us get a little bit more information that was helpful. And ultimately led to Eliza. So we're very just grateful to have had a proactive and really communicative and supportive medical team.
Awesome. Now, what about from here? Is you obviously IVF has its costs, both financially and emotionally, and as well as the fact that you guys experienced those 2 miscarriages. Is Eliza seem like the okay, we got our girl, we're set, or do you guys plan on trying again? And are you going to use do you still have some embryos on reserve, or you're going to have to go through another round of IVF?
Yeah, so we're really fortunate. We're actually expecting our second daughter currently. Olivia's about 23 weeks pregnant right now.
Congratulations!
Great. So yeah, thanks so much. And yeah, another embryo from our first round of IVF. So that embryo is older technically than Eliza, which is kind of a funny thing of IVF treatment. So yeah, we sent out several embryos from first and second round for genetic testing, and we came back with 2 that were good to go normal, and the first one was Eliza and the second one is baby that's growing right now. So it was really a game changer for us, and fortunate in so many ways, because we absolutely know that for many folks out there it's a lot longer journey, and there are so many steps along the way. Everybody's journey is their own, and it's so difficult, and we just feel really fortunate for where we are right now, but definitely just feel lucky for things as kind of simple as embryo freezing technology, which is so much better in the last 10 years. We would not have even had the opportunity to do what we've done were that not so advanced now. So that's been really helpful. And that's just crossing our fingers at this point for another healthy couple months of pregnancy, and then that will be the end of the journey for us. We're now have passed the mid 30s and are moving toward the later 30s. And so, we're just really grateful for where we are. And certainly if, we definitely said with this last embryo transfer, which took place in February, which led to the current pregnancy, we kind of said, this is it. Whether this works or not, we're happy with where you are. having Eliza was more than we could have imagined at many of our really hard moments. And so kind of just left it up to the universe at that point and said, whatever happens, we're going to move on and feel like that's the right thing for us. And sure, there's always things you wish and grieve for, and things, turn out the way they turn out. But we just feel really, really fortunate for how it's been at this point, and fortunate for the medical team and all of that stuff, and just for the things that we've learned and the people we've connected with along the way, because it is such a hard, lonely journey. But it's so great, as I've said many times, just to see how much people are getting out there, social media, podcast, blogs, and sharing their stories, because that's the way we learn better than anything else. And, you also mentioned the cost of fertility treatments. We again, very fortunate there, where we're at in New York State. There's an insurance coverage mandate for large employers. Very fortunate that my employer falls under that mandate. And so we had coverage. But one thing I want to make sure I mention just about the book briefly is that proceeds from every sale of the book will go to the Stork Foundation, which is a foundation that makes grants to couples to support the cost of fertility treatment. We understand how fortunate Elvie and I were to be in that position of having insurance, and really wanted to give something additional back with the book to hopefully support some other couples out there who can benefit, because to have that financial burden on top of the existing kind of stress and anxiety and just calling into question so much that comes with fertility. We wanted to make sure that there's some aspect of giving back to it too, and definitely understand that that's the same for adoption, for all lots of other family building journeys. It's an expensive business, and we're hopeful that in the years ahead, more kind of resources will be out there to help families be able to access whatever is right for them.
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons, again, I'm glad I came upon you, is that you are giving back to the community that's helped you along on your family journey, and that you are trying to help the dreams and wishes of other families come true. And that's also why, I've started this podcast, and I had been working on building a life coaching business and speaking business before all this. And then it was kind of like when our adoption was finalized, it just kind of hit me like, you know what, there's a different demographic that needs some attention that I've been missing. And it just seems right for me to be focusing on this journey of families being built however it works for anybody. Again, it could be, again, in your blog, I mentioned, families with just the fur babies. There's families going through IVF, families going through surrogacy, foster adoption, whatever it may be. It's so important to kind of focus on that community and sharing those stories like yours, like ours, and
Absolutely.
anyone else that is interested in being a part of that and looking to give back. So I'm so thankful that you're doing that through your book, through your blog, through your posts, because even your Instagram account, I see, is just, you're putting tips and advice and different things on there, and you've had some guest appearances on your blog. And so leading into that, where can people find you, and as well as find your book?
Yeah, well, thanks. So you can find me on Instagram at the IVF Dad. You can check out my website, which is theivfdad.com. You're more than welcome to also just shoot me an email. It's theivfdad@gmail.com. Try to make it, all the same, as easy to remember. And the book will be out on Amazon, so I'll try to make sure we get a link there. You can find a link on my website, and it'll be available. Especially at the beginning, we're going to have really low prices at the start. We just want to encourage it to get out there. You'll be able to get it on Kindle for $4.99. That's, for better or worse, that's less than a gallon of gas these days. And again, just want to emphasize, like, most of that money is going to the Stork Foundation. I did not get into this with any, dreams of like having a retirement home or something like that, or like a lake house. This is to give back to the community. And that's why it was so important to do that charitable contribution. I'm really glad that the Stork Foundation agreed to let me do that. And I hope folks will check it out. So get it out there on Amazon. You can get a soft copy, again, we'll have very reasonable introductory prices to hopefully just get it out there and share it with people. So I'm excited to put it out in the world.
Absolutely. Well, Keegan, I just appreciate you so much for, again, coming on and sharing your story, sharing your wealth of information. And I encourage everyone to definitely check out the book. So again, Keegan, thank you so much for being on today. Again, congratulations on the second pregnancy, and thoughts and well wishes, prayers, all that for continued healthy pregnancy the rest of the way.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dustin. Thank you again for having me on, and thank you for what you're doing. It's just so important, and just wonderful to give everybody the opportunity to connect and share our stories. So just thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And for all you, if you have a story to share, or something that you're going through, or just have advice or information that you think other people need to know, please do not hesitate to share that with the world, because honestly, we need more people showing that you're not alone, that we're all in this together. Friends and families stick together, and it doesn't matter if you're fur baby, IVF baby, natural pregnancy, foster adoption, doesn't matter. We're born into our names, but we become family by heart.